Folks, this is the episode of the Rush Hour Golf Podcast with our special guest, Golf Lover UK, that's going to make you question everything you thought about reality.
I'll try.
There's something out in the ether right now that potentially the PGA Tour is intentionally trying to, as the British would say, scupper the merger, scupper the deal. Golf Lover UK, what is your insight into this?
Well, I think let's go back right to the 5th of June, right? 5th of June, everyone hated each other. We weren't allowed to be friends because that's what the PGA Tour said. And then the 6th of June, there's Jay holding hands with you see it, saying we're all meant to be friends again. And Jay went through all the things he went through and we saw all that. But actually, midway through the 6th and then into the 7th of June, there were lots of things in the document that made anyone with half a brain go, well, why would LIV agree to that? Why would, and some things like, well, what interest is that for PGA Tour? And I think what came out was this agreement of working together and wanting to be together and wanting to walk down the street holding hands together. And I got an old phrase: you walk down the street and the other bloke's dick in your hand. You're leading him down the path, like you like you're kind of in control. But hey, right. That's kind of the way it felt. Is that we had two parties who weren't necessarily wanting to do something together, but were crossing arms and going down the street together because there was kind of a mutual benefit and they wanted to make sure that the person wasn't going to go wild and do something else. Yeah. So I actually believe, based on everything we've seen, there was never an intention for this merger to go through. I actually don't think there is an intention for this merger to go through. I think there was one reason and one reason only, and that was to get the lawsuits dropped. I think it suited both parties, but mostly the PGA Tour, who were hemorrhaging cash on lawyers, which has been admitted by Ed Hurley and Jimmy Dunn and others, and people at the other guy. I've already forgotten his name. Ron Price, who was at the hearing about all the money that was hemorrhaging out. So I think for the PGA Tour, they wanted those lawsuits dropped because they knew they couldn't cope financially, and I think both parties probably know that this merger probably won't go through. And what do they get out of it? Well, the lawsuits get dropped, and LIV have now got the biggest ace they could ever want. They've not got 4 aces; they've now got 5 aces. They've managed to keep the conversation, the ridiculous moral conversation that was being lauded over different people for different reasons. That's now been put to bed because the PGA Tour have sort of given that card away. So that's what LIV have got out of it, and the PGA Tour have got the lawsuits to disappear. And I know that Pro Golf Critic's going to come on to a little bit about some of the rain groups and other stuff in a moment, and all the different things that are out in the ether. But I think it's really important to see that no matter what's happened about let's work together, there have been a lot of negative, horrible comments from the PGA Tour and some members that have made it look less and less likely that there will be a merger. If you and I had agreed to merge our companies, Big Boy, we would have been positive about each other. We'd have been complimentary about each other. I'd have got all my bloody staff in line also doing the same. I'd have got my media people that I'd got working with me in line. You would have done the same. That hasn't happened. The only form of working together has been in that initial conversation. I just feel that what they got out of it was the dropped law cases, and now that 5th ace has been given over to the LIV Tour, quite rightly, and I think that's what they got out of it. I don't know, really. I think the merger will go ahead.
Pro Golf Critic, you've been out on record saying that you still believe in the merger in some form or the other. We had the Senate hearing. Do you still feel that the merger is going through?
Long story short, yes. I still think that the merger is going to go through. Quick side note, though, I really hope that the 5th ace thing doesn't happen because I don't have to get another hat. But side note. So I do think that the merger is still going to go through. However, I think we have to establish that there's a lot of people at the PGA Tour in their leadership that I've figured out just over the course of time. This is just a lot of it's sort of logic and reasoning given some of the information that I've heard. There's infighting at the PGA Tour about this. Some people never wanted to come to the table. Some people wanted to sort of forge through with the path that the PGA Tour is on. I do think that there are people at the PGA Tour that wanted to make this, that still want to make this particular merger work. And there's like breadcrumbs to all of this stuff. Like, you don't just have like Randall Stevenson, who's the former CEO of AT&T, who's a longtime member of the PGA Tour board, just like resign and then going out the door is like sort of moralizing and like making all these points, kind of clout chasing out the door. Like that to me was clearly a sign that there's infighting in the PGA Tour board of directors. I've heard that within the board, there's certain people that like aren't even on speaking terms right now. Like, I think that the only people that want the merger to go through are certain people at the PGA Tour, and I do think that Yasser and the PIF and that whole group, like they really do want this merger to go through. I do think that they have way more leverage in this than anybody in the media is going to admit. So I do think that that side, the sort of PIF side, if you look at a lot of the documentation going back and forth, I think that it's going to skew way towards what the PIF and sort of PCP Capital Partners was proposing in the deal. Like, it's going to skew towards that if this does go through. Time is going to tell if this actually does, because there's just so many complicating factors in here with the PIF and the PGA Tour and some of the other financing that's out there and the relationship that they have with certain players at the PGA Tour. There's a lot going on behind the scenes that, frankly, a lot of this stuff is not really coming out in the media. I think that it probably will at some point, but so everybody just needs to keep all of this in mind as we sort of move forward.
Here's a follow-up question to you, Pro Golf Critic. If it doesn't go through, doesn't basically at that point LIV have its pick of the litter, as in these players now are in a very much unstable situation, and you become almost the only game in town?
I think that they do to a certain extent, except I do think that we have to realize there's going to be certain players that like remain loyal to the tour, pretty much no matter what happens. Like, they're just that either them or their agents or the people in their management, like they're basically never going to let them leave the PGA Tour.
They like playing in America. They want to be in America. They want to be American based. They love what they do. They're very happy with it. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you want to play that, if you want to do that, do that.
Really quickly, I do think that the most important thing to keep in mind is that we do need a healthy PGA Tour and a healthy LIV to really grow professional golf. And that's the sort of North Star that I'm really trying to get to. So,
Golf Lover UK, you just said that some people might want to play on the PGA Tour. You just said this while Rory McIlroy is, as per the Golf Channel, well rested after having to go through the grueling designated event schedule. He took some time off after Travelers, and now he's at the Scottish. So it almost goes against what you're saying in terms of wanting to go through this grinding of a situation, contrasting with all these LIV players who are now proclaiming that they're very much more refreshed and playing better in the majors. So I'm thinking that even that narrative is starting to fade away in terms of how they used to grill the LIV players about, hey, you're actually going to be playing the same amount of golf or more, when actually they're actually playing less, as they were, somewhat suggesting they would do. And the PGA Tour players are going through this grueling schedule right now because they're forced to play these designated events.
I think that the designated events, the elevated event series, and then the events underneath, and they're contractually got to play this, that, and the other. I think that was a lot of that was reactionary to LIV. And I wouldn't be surprised to see some of that get reined back a little bit to give people that time off. And look, I've said before, I think that Jay is a bad leader, and I don't think he's very good at his job, but I don't think he's a bad person, and I don't think he has done anything deliberately to harm the PGA Tour. And I think that some of the things he said, he's been given maybe loaded guns from other people behind the PGA Tour.
100%.
And I think he's... Sorry?
No, I said 100% right. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I think that what we're seeing probably is Jay Monahan has maybe been a little bit manipulated himself, but hey. But I think they're probably... think they're probably wise enough to understand that the tour to survive needs to keep its players. I actually did a little list. It'd take me 10 seconds to find it. I did a list earlier of the players I thought would probably never go because they like their life the way it is and where they're doing it.
Golf Lover UK, this is perfect. Before you go through your list, I know Pro Golf Critic had brought up these guys who are so adamantly loyal to the PGA Tour. So before you get to the list, let's reflect on the fact that Jordan Spieth, Xander Schauffele, and Scottie Scheffler just came out on record saying, for example, Xander Schauffele, he doesn't trust Jay Monahan. It takes a lot to get back his trust. Scheffler's discontent. And then Spieth is also talking about being left in the dark, while at the same time, Golden Boy Rory comes out there and says that the Senate hearing wasn't that much of a surprise to him because he's already been kind of clued in on some level. So does this at all affect either of your opinions? Golf Lover UK first.
I think as a species, we are very forgiving if we want the outcome that sits on the side we need to forgive. It's why husbands forgive wives and wives forgive husbands for infidelity, because essentially they still want a large element of what's on that side of the fence. So if Jay gets removed and the PJ can save face, and instead of having to play, I'll pick a random number, 11 out of 12 designated events, they only have to play 9 out of 12 designated events, then that might help everyone be able to make that move. Because if someone says sorry and someone's head rolls, they'll go, okay, look, they can save face. They can say, look, we've got changes, we've got what we want. Jay's now being. I think that might be the easy way out for everybody.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that a lot of the players that have sort of voiced their opinions, I still think that there's sort of factions within that. They're not all on the same page as far as like some of where the trust has been broken to the point where like it's never going to be rebuilt. I think some of these guys, like they'll say that in the press, and then a few weeks will go by and they're just like they're so loyal to the tour that it almost doesn't even matter. Like I do think that there are going to be changes to the schedule next year. I do think that it's going to be a little bit more player friendly. And I do think that there are going to be certain things that happen that like make some of those players a little bit more comfortable. And I still think that there are some shoes to drop here.
Okay, Pro Golf Critic, you made some assertions or some beliefs based on what? Why do you think that after this past 14 months or so with so much back and forth, how do you still have this belief system where you can't have a person? You had Jay Monahan himself saying he's okay, I accept it, I'm a hypocrite. So yeah. You guys keep reading into stuff that I never see is there because there's no facts to back it up.
Well, I wouldn't say there aren't any facts. I think that, and a lot of it isn't necessarily like, oh, I spoke to Jordan Spieth and he told me X, Y, and Z. Like that's not the case. Some of this is sort of reading the tea leaves that like there's some of those players, like they're not necessarily making all the decisions. Like it's their agents, it's their managers, and some of these players,
human nature.
It's actually their parents making the decision.
What I've done is I've read the tea leaves in terms of Schauffele, Spieth, and Scheffler's actual quotes recently. Mm-hmm. And to me, it indicates a strong level of dissatisfaction when you have normally very bland, vanilla, mild-mannered guys coming out on record for the first time and saying, hey, we don't know what's going on. I'm not happy with this. But somehow you're interpreting this as a fact that they're going to remain loyal. Whereas I feel like
not all of them. Not all. I need to be clear here. Like Xander is one case, Scottie Scheffler is another case, and Jordan Spieth is a wholly separate case. Like we need to start taking these on an individual case by case basis. The reason being is because a lot of these guys have talked to LIV. Some of them had deals in place that for whatever reason fell through. Some of them were never going to have deals with LIV because they're too loyal, they're too entrenched in the establishment. They're not going to be part of LIV. And they like
their lifestyle. They like their lifestyle. Scottie Scheffler. I don't see Scottie Scheffler ever going to LIV. he loves being a good old American boy. He loves his lifestyle over there. I don't see him going. But who do I see going? Like out that top 15 in the world? I think you've got to look at Cantlay, Hovland, Schauffele, Wyndham Clark, and Keegan Bradley. Like Keegan Bradley, I will give you. I'll give you $50, big boy, if Keegan Bradley isn't playing in the first live event of 2024. I'll give you $50. There is no way that Keegan Bradley, who two of his best mates already play on live, isn't going.
He
I think
wants
that
to be part of the high flyers so bad. It's not even
absolutely, like it's like the worst kept secret. He's but I think that there are people who really like being. They like being the poster boy as well. Because the other thing you remember, big boy, we talk about human nature. If you're Max Homer, you're Tony Finau, you're recovering Will Zalatoris, you're Jordan Spieth. If Xander, Patrick, and say Keegan go, or Victor, Wind, whatever else, a few others go, you are now the only few remaining stars. And that's a really good place to be. If you want, because I agree with Pro Golf Critic, we need a strong PGA Tour for golf to be successful. We need a strong PGA Tour. We need a strong LIV Tour. And I actually think that what you'll find, and like other people, I think will go. I think if Cameron Young will go, I wouldn't be surprised if Sung Jim goes. Jason Day. We know, and we'll talk about it in another show. We know from what we've heard there'll be three more teams, or each team will be increased to 5, not 4. So they're going to need another European team. Sepp Straka's a great name to go across if Victor Hovland went. And then you've got other people like Adam Scott and Emmanuel Negrillo. Names that just feel kind of obvious to go, kind of obvious to stay. It feels to me that Russell Henley stays, Harris English stays, Chris Kirk stays, Billy Horschel stays. Billy Horschel can't go after his comments. There's a lot of good old American boys that are going to stay on the tour. Sam Burns, probably. Colin Morikawa, JT, Ricky, who knows? I just think that there are enough people that even though they feel like they've been shit on Big Boy, they're going to stay because they want what the PGA Tour offers, and they'll square it in the way in their mind of Jay's gone, the PGA Tour have said sorry, and that's how they'll justify it.
Golf Lover UK, then, what is the PGA Tour at this point? No one seems to know what exactly the brand means anymore. It's an event organizer. They switched in the past year to designated events. They're going to no-cut events. So now they've dropped the old tradition and legacy aspect. So what exactly? They're losing sponsors. Now they've lost the moral high ground. They're looking for actually funding from PIF. So what does the PGA Tour look like in 2024?
There's two questions. There's two scenarios. What's the PGA Tour look like with or without LIV? That's the big difference. With LIV, what's it look like? It's the main tour alongside LIV, which is doing this. Without LIV, what's it look like? It looks like a competitive tour, a competitor tour that's got some issues, and people have been through that. But if they don't do the merger, the one thing that PGA Tour does have, it does have basically full control of the DP World Tour. So it's got the ability to use some of the resources from over there, the Rolex Series, whatever else, and get players as a funnel. If they're struggling for money, one of the first things they can do is they can cut this field at the size of their fields, and they can also cut a few events. Cutting a few events will make some of their members happy because they don't have to play as many events. The opposite field events can disappear as well. The opposite event, if I was a PGA Tour, one of the first things I'd do is get rid of the opposite field events straight away. They are a complete waste of money. They don't make any money at all. Yeah, they're a complete cash bin. There's 4 of them. Is it 4 opposite field events? I think maybe 4 or 5. Just get rid of them. So you say, what's it look like? Well, they'll have to go back and lick their wounds and redevelop. And I think that's all they can do is try and keep their brand going while having almost a rebrand internally to their members.
Yeah, I think that's the exact plan that's going on. Like we've already seen it with 2023. Like we already have some idea of, we're just going to continue. We're going to pretend like the LIV players don't exist, and we're going to go forward with the designated events that are going to have more of our best players in those fields. And granted, like those tournaments have been pretty good. Like, would they have been way better with the LIV players? Of course, it's not even a debate. But I do think that the blueprint is already there towards like what they're looking for. And part of the reason why I want the merger to go through is because I want all of these organizations to be working in lockstep. I think that's really, really important, where we have more crossover events. Like the LIV players have clear pathways to the majors. We have a handful of crossover events where the PGA Tour players and the LIV players are playing in the same events, because that's going to make for the most compelling pro golf product. If you have these completely separate entities, it totally changes the scheme.
All right, so you just said that that you want the PGA Tour and LIV to work in lockstep. But as we started off this episode, Golf Lover UK pointed out that if you were actually having a merger, you wouldn't be talking about the other side like that. So why do you think what you've seen over the last, I don't know, since June 6th or June 7th, you haven't seen these guys even on the corporate level work in lockstep to put out the same messages, or, you know what I mean? They're still not working together. So why do you think that this is the easy part where you can work together? Why do you think when you have to actually coordinate the tournaments, the harder part, they're going to actually magically be able to work in lockstep?
Because I think that if they are going to work in lockstep, the people that are causing the shit will be gone.
Right.
So that's the thing. Once they have their power struggle sorted out and they decide, it will either be they decide who's going to run it and then they will make a decision, or they decide what the decision will be and those that don't like it will leave. So I actually think that...
And that's already started. That's already started with Randall Stevenson leaving.
Yeah, so I think it's probably... I say I don't think the merger will go ahead. I think it's probably, at the moment, it's 50-50. Whether the merger goes ahead, and it will be, and you could see some of the comments being made in the Senate hearing and the way they were speaking that I don't even think that there was agreement between the two gentlemen in the room of what they wanted to happen. So
no, I
think
I completely agree.
I'm going to jump in here with this. Now, you watch the Senate hearing, and if anything, Senator Ron Johnson is running interference for COO of PGA Tour Ron Price and Jimmy Dunn by feeding them the narrative, the talking points that they're supposed to say, and all they have to kind of do is say yes. He's trying to walk them through the fact that the reality of the situation is a rock and a hard place. He's the one who's saying over and over again, hey, the Saudis have 500 times the budget. He's putting all the talking points out there, while Jimmy Dunn just says Tiger Woods got to dig it out of the dirt. So to me, the Senate hearing seems like that's how you would act if you're trying to tank the deal, because are we to believe that Jimmy Dunn, who's showing up at the Senate hearing, is the same smooth-talking deal maker that reached out to Yasser Al-Rumayyan and then was able to coordinate this deal? That doesn't seem like... He didn't seem like a deal maker to me.
So
I think he's out of his depth. I think he's out of his depth where he was. I think a lot of people would struggle under those lights. I think it's a hard thing to do, and I think that since June the 6th, he's had a lot of backlash. I think maybe things have changed. But look, sorry, I interrupted. Go Pro Golf. Sorry, buddy.
No, really quick. A really important point is that we have to stop thinking about the PGA Tour like everybody is on the same page, because they're not. Like, I do think on the PIF LIV side, they are working way more as a cohesive unit than the PGA Tour is. So if this is going to work, there's going to have to be people in leadership at the PGA Tour that are no longer there, because there are people there that 100% want to torpedo this thing. I don't think there's any question about that. And those are the people that need to be rooted out, and in order for this to go forward. And like, those are the internal infighting that like, we're just going to have to wait and see how this plays out. I wish I could give everybody the blueprint of exactly how this is going to go. I don't know. No one knows exactly how this is going to go. We can kind of give an educated guess, except know for a fact that there's infighting in the PGA Tour, and those are the things that need to be resolved in order for this to go forward.
Golf Lover UK, let me get back to a point you were making. You said one of the benefits for the LIV side, actually for the PGA Tour side, was that they made the framework agreement and it got rid of the litigation aspect.
Yep.
That's a big one.
Okay. So the PGA Tour side, their legal team is Ed Hurley. His law firm is the one making the money. They spent $50 million on legal fees. It's internal. So why would Ed Hurley want the litigation end when his law firm is the one making the money?
Because I think this is back to Pro Golf Critics point. There's not one single leader inside what's going on. There's Ed Hurley, there's Jimmy Dunn, there's Jay Monahan, there's Ron Price. There's a lot of people with their own thoughts. They've all got influences from different verticals of money, from different management companies, from different equity houses. They've all got different strands and information. And I think the one thing they were trying to avoid, which makes me I laughed so hard, and I kept making the joke last week. Imagine signing an agreement so that you could avoid the lawsuit and everything being brought up in court, only to be summoned for the Senate to read all the stuff that's going to be not shown in court on TV. They tried to avoid it all coming out in court, and then half of it was read out on TV anyway. So I think this is the point, and it's so clear straight away with the fact they've been told now they cannot have the no poaching of players because of the way that works. The American antitrust thing is slightly different. It's not there's not the same equivalence over here. But the point being is that they know there are different people running and pulling different levers. And I think that's the only answer we can give to you, big boy, is that there are different levers of power pulling different things. I would imagine there are 2 or 3 people in the PGA Tour that really want this merge to go ahead because they know that it's the right way to go and it's the right way for world golf. There are probably 2 or 3 other people that really don't want it to go ahead, and they would love there to be a different money source coming into the PGA Tour, and they're possibly trying to scupper it so that another money source can come in and do an empty investment. Now, this is the type of thing we're playing with. It's money, it's power. We're talking about conjecture, but we're not stupid people. We can look at some of the things that are going on and try and take some educated guesses and thoughts around this. I know Pro Golf Critics got a thought based on the Delaware meeting on some of that stuff as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of conflicts of interest, and I think it's a lot of conflicts of interest sort of generally with the PGA Tour and then with these individual factions within the PGA Tour. I think my suggestion to everybody, maybe I'll retweet this article, I don't know, but there's a lot of stuff that's been going on in the pro golf world when it comes to the financing of LIV and the PGA Tour and all these things that go back to the PGL, which was an idea that came about, a while ago. Andy Gardner of the Premier Golf League, he had been trying to put together this sort of new golf league that looks very much like how LIV looks now. And he had his own sources of financing to potentially pull off this coup. Those primary 2 sources of financing were the Saudi PIF and Rain Group. Those were the 2 primary sources. Now, obviously, the PGL couldn't get off the ground for a variety of reasons. LIV Golf came in, obviously financed almost 100% by the Saudi PIF. They've come in, they've been the huge disruptor. Obviously, they fund LIV Golf, and it's led us to the moment where we're at now. Going back to the Delaware meeting that Tiger and Ricky Fowler and all those guys were in, there was one non-player that was in that meeting that for some reason this information, this is in the public domain. This isn't something that only I know or we know. This is out in the public domain. The other guy that was in that meeting was this really big, important person that works at the Rain Group. So just put the 2 pieces of the puzzle together. Saudi PIF wanted to get involved in professional golf. Rain Group's got billions of dollars. They want to get involved in professional golf. They've been waiting in the wings this whole time to sort of wait and see how this thing plays out. I'm pretty sure their plan hasn't changed. They still want to be heavily involved in professional golf. So you can just put 2 and 2 together that, if this person was in that Delaware meeting that had Tiger, who's been very silent the past month, he was in there with Rory, he's in with all these other players that were part of that Delaware meeting. You can see how they were able to sort of push the PGA Tour to make changes that like almost solely benefited the people in that room. And all of this is part of a larger plan that's at stake here, potentially involving Tomorrow Sports, which is obviously Tiger and Rory's venture with, I might add, other investors in that. Jimmy Dunn. This is all like public information, by the way. Jimmy Dunn, investor. Excel Sports Management, which is the manager of Tiger Woods, the manager of a bunch of other PGA Tour players, big investor in Tomorrow Sports. All these guys are linked with Rain Group. You do the math to figure out what the potential source of the funding is if certain people want to potentially torpedo this deal with the PIF. What's the other source of funding that can potentially come in to replace PIF?
Okay, on that note then, if these people are powerful enough to torpedo the PIF, basically the PIF funding, which is the LIV PGA Tour merger, if they're powerful enough, then you're thinking that the merger's not going through, right? Because that's the merger in a nutshell.
I don't think they are powerful enough. I think that there are forces that are trying to torpedo it. Like I said, this is part of the reason why I think the merger is going to go through, because they're not powerful enough to try to squeeze Yasser and the PIF out. And I do think that Yasser and the PIF, they really are acting in good faith. Like, there's so many times that they could have totally torpedoed this deal, done the nuclear option, invest a bunch more billions of dollars in LIV, and basically push that idea forward. They've had many opportunities to do that. They have not done that for a very specific reason. They want this to actually work, and I do think that they are working in good faith to make sure that it does. That being said, there's other people, specifically within the PGA Tour power structure, that don't want that. So all this is going to shake itself out probably over the next 4, 5, 6 months. I wish I could tell you how it's going to go. I still think that the merger goes through, but we'll have to see.
It kind of feels like, are there enough people that want it to go through on the PGA Tour side to cancel out the money and power of those that don't want it to go through? That's kind of, with the next 2 to 5 months, we will know whether the ones that want to go through had enough power and position and enough votes or sway to stop it going, to keep it going, or whether the power that Pro Golf's talked about has been able to wield its hand and prevent it going through. But the one thing that's clear to everyone, whether it went through or whether it goes through or doesn't go through, terrible English, whether it goes through or does not go through, whichever side you are on in the PGA Tour, you needed the lawsuits to stop, because you couldn't fight, you couldn't keep fighting that, you couldn't be an outside funder of the PGA Tour with all the lawsuits going on, and you couldn't be the PGA Tour to try and work with LIV and the lawsuits going on. So that's for me, that's what it's all about. Getting rid of those lawsuits was just what they wanted.
All right, I've got a question for you, Golf Lover UK. As I pointed out before, Ed Hurley, PGA Tour board of director member, his law firm is ringing up these charges. Do the PGA Tour players not realize that, hey, all this money that is disappearing is because this guy within our own PGA Tour board of directors, they couldn't outsource it to a cheaper law firm? Because I also want to ask you another question, then a follow-up. Look at the quality of legal advice they've been getting. Look at how these guys, they're getting talking points memos, but Jimmy Dunn and Ron Price don't have any talking point memos in the actual Senate hearing. It actually isn't that hard to stick through 5 or 6 talking points, especially when you've been saying the same ones over and over for 3 or 4 months. So I feel like a little bit like you guys are being a little bit too defensive of these guys and how hard it is, because these guys have risen to the top of their corporations. They've given tons of presentations. They know they're going to get grilled. They can prepare in advance. And Senator Ron Johnson said all the talking points 3 times, at the beginning, the middle, at the end of this hearing. So he had them mastered. I don't understand why these guys who aren't 18-year-old kids in college couldn't have done a better performance than that in the actual Senate hearing.
Except maybe some of the people that were giving them those talking points don't want this deal to go through. Like, what if you were trying to torpedo this deal? Maybe one of the things you would do is make sure that maybe you don't want them to be as prepared as they could be. You want to go as bad as possible so that it goes another route. Like I'm not saying that happened, but these are the things that people need to think about.
All right, let me get back to that point then, Golf Lover UK. Your in-house law department, your Ed Hurley, he's billing, it was like $50 million for the PGA Tour side. And they're now even getting their non-solicitation thing removed because it's not necessary, right? So you came up with this framework agreement, I'm assuming by the PGA Tour lawyers. It's only 4 pages and some signatures, and even that doesn't have parts of it that are going to pass muster. How do you mess that up when you're paying them one of the most expensive law firms in the world to do this M&A deal? Does that make sense? Does that you obviously work in law? These you've hired the best of the best, and you can't get a 4-page framework agreement totally through on board. There's still something as you find out you have to get stricken off the or ignored.
What I would say is, does it feel like any of it was given time to get right? From what we are told and from what I've been led to believe, I'm not defending Ed Hurley and Ed Hurley's law firm here. That's not what I'm doing. I'm just saying that Ed Hurley and his law firm, from what we can gather in this framework agreement, Jimmy Dunn had the conversation, a gentle conversation with Yasir and whatever else, on around about the 29th, 30th of May. And on around about the late on the 4th, 5th, early 5th of June, they sat down to thrash out an agreement, which they then put up on the 6th of June. Like, I think that there's so many moving parts and so much going on that I can understand why there wasn't. And I can also understand why, when I looked at what one side wanted, another side wanted this, and this, and you get this, and we get that. And buried in the document, which I don't think has been focused on, was the agreement in principle that the top 24 LIV players got automatic entry to the majors. That was buried in documents. I think that the whole thing has been done very quickly, which is probably why since the 7th of June, there's been so much feeling around what's going on. I think that's why I'm really, because I'm a boring person at times, I'm really excited to see what the next 4 weeks looks like. Because I actually think the next 4 weeks we'll understand if this is going to go through or not. Because Jay will return in the next week or so. And we've got people like Hunter Mahan saying, "We're done with Jay." That was his quote. "We're done with Jay."
Yeah, he tweeted that.
Yeah. I think it'd be interesting to see what happens. And the big point you asked, Big Boy, which I thought was quite interesting, is how do the players in the PGA Tour cope seeing bills get paid out? Again, I'm going to go back to many of them are happy playing golf. They're earning their money. They're happy doing what they're doing. They're going to tolerate things that they maybe don't understand and don't ask questions about and don't want to get involved with, because actually they really enjoy turning up to Memorial. They make most of the cuts. They're going to be in the elevated events. I think that it's worth always remembering with human nature that people will ignore things that don't make them happy if their overall happiness is there.
Yes, and a lot of these guys, I completely agree. I think a lot of these guys, they don't care about any of that stuff. Like, all they really care about, and this was one of the sort of quotes that leaked out from one of the player meetings where they were meeting with PGA Tour management, was that the only thing they really cared about was, making a boatload of money, and they are basically abdicating like their feelings, their emotions to this group. That's their purpose, is to make sure they funnel as much money to those players as possible. A lot of these guys, they don't want to be involved in the decision making process. A lot of them do not care. A lot of them, and this is why, like, I have a hard time saying that the PGA Tour is like a player-run organization, when there's so many players that just don't care. They just want to play golf. They just want to play golf for as much money as possible, and none of the other stuff really matters. Like, and I would love it if more players were just like transparent about that. Like, that would be like, they're always trying to demand all this transparency from the LIV players. Like, oh, just tell us you did it for the money. Every single professional golfer plays golf for the money. Don't try to make it a moral thing. Don't try to make it a principle thing. That's what they're doing it for.
I also want to just focus very quickly on the PGA Tour. Got loads of stuff to sort out, and I'm not saying they're good guys or bad guys. I think that it's really easy for people to go, if you want it to go through, you're a good guy or you're a bad guy, or if you don't want it to go through, you're a good guy or a bad guy. Ed Hurley and his team. You've got Ron Price and his people. You've got Jimmy Dunn and his people. I think it's very easy to be maybe too hard on people without knowing exactly what conversations are going on behind closed doors, what people want to happen. But what I will say is that if you look at the last 5 weeks, LIV are pushing on. I was at LIV London. The atmosphere is incredibly positive. Loads of talks about the future, talks about multi-year contracts with places like Valderrama, Centurion. Are they going to have an Ireland event? Sounds like it's highly likely there could be an event in Ireland. Loads of talk about a second event going to be in Australia, in Queensland, where Cam Smith's from. A couple of talks about different Asian events. Maybe there only being 6 or 7 events in America. That's not necessarily. I'm not saying it's people from LIV who said that, but like it's just talk around the whole facility of the whole event and tournament and fans getting into it and like what's going to happen. What are you hearing? What are you hearing? And on the PGA Tour, you see a lot of very upset, angry people, and I think actually they've almost got to go through a period of mourning and regrouping and understanding of what does the future look like, and they need to call on their leaders in the PGA Tour. They need to call on Jimmy, Ed, Ron Price and Jay to say, well, if you are our leaders, what is your vision for the next 6 weeks?
Let me push back a little bit here then. And this, you're actually proving my point that why would you want to stay on the PGA Tour? It's all nebulous at this point. You don't know what's going on, where the LIV side, they have the next year scheduled out. You have more stability. Why would you choose the PGA Tour, which is offering you like no concrete examples of what's going on next year, when you know what LIV is going on, with what's going on with LIV? You also, in terms of that, remember when the merger initially happened, the PGA Tour side again was trying to torpedo LIV by saying that they were going to go under. That Greg Norman was getting fired. Remember all those rumors that came out? So to me, I still don't understand why, as a PGA Tour player, you would want to. What's there to be loyal to anymore? Your leadership has not been transparent with you. They've literally lied to you to the point where Jay Monahan has to admit he's a hypocrite. You don't know what you watch the Senate hearing. You realize these guys don't know what they're going on. Ron Price doesn't even know about the Schedule F that Senator Hawley is talking about when they're doing deals in China. So you have the COO not knowing about anything that's going on, just fairly basic stuff. You have your lawyers, your internal lawyer sucking up all the legal fees internally, and then trying to claim that the benefit of this whole deal, as per the Senate hearing, was that you were able to keep the LIV lawyers in the dark, right? That was the whole point. But are we also going to ignore the fact that maybe on some level, the whole point is to keep the players in the dark? As Jay pointed out, it's a membership-run organization, but the members don't know anything. And you can see what here, they've actively gone out of their way to apparently keep the lawyers, the LIV side lawyers, in the dark, but in so doing also kept every one of the members in the dark.
No, like I said, I think a lot of players don't care about any of that stuff, and I do think that we do have to, just from a macro view, think about what's happened over the past year. Like, you know, a lot of the players that went over to LIV, they were demonized in the media. All this other stuff happened. There was all this propaganda about how basically, like, if you stuck with the PGA Tour, you were staying loyal to this like American institution, and like you were being patriotic, and all of these things that get shoved down our throats here in America, that like everybody buys into it. When it's like we do need to sort of parse that out a little bit, that like that's all like propaganda, except a lot of people buy into it, and like they let that sort of influence the decision making. Like a lot of these guys, they don't want to be disliked. They don't want to like go through some of the heat that a lot of the LIV players went through. Like a lot of the LIV players, and this is why they've earned a lot of my respect, is because they didn't care about that stuff. They didn't care about what people said about them. Like they were still going to go through with it. There's a lot of players that stayed on the PGA Tour that do not want that, and they're willing to stick with the PGA Tour through thick and thin for all of those reasons.
And there's a lot of people that I said before, people stay with wives and husbands when they cheat. People stay with bosses when they don't treat them well. People make decisions that don't necessarily always make sense to the outsider. And I think that there will be many people in the PGA Tour as players that have got great relationships with Ed Hurley, great relationships with Jimmy Dunn, great relationships with Ron Price and Jay Monahan. Some have said they don't. That's fine. But there will be those that do. There'll be those that know that next year there's going to be a tour that's in place because this many events are already guaranteed to happen because they're long-standing events. And they know they'll go there, they'll make their money, they live in America, they're happy, and they don't want to travel. Because if what's going to happen with LIV, which seems likely, is it will be 7 USA, 7 overseas. That's 7 events you've got to travel for. A lot of people don't want to do that. That's not what they're up for. So there'll be many people who are just going to go, I'm not overly happy what's going on, but I've not really got involved with it, and I'm happy to stay where I am. And they'll just be blasé about it. They've got apathy to what's going on. They've got no inertias creative for them to get moving.
Here's a question of that then. This is the first year that we had all the PGA Tour suddenly found all this money, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So these guys are all about making the money. And as Phil Mickelson pointed out, these guys have this money in reserve. They dump it. So now you know these guys are holding out on you when they can until they're called out on it. That's a little bit of a trust issue, I'd say to myself. Correct? Okay. Well, let me finish then. Let me finish.
Okay.
Now we have to specify which players. Are you talking the top 70? Because remember, they also changed the rules there. And then they were going to be like, okay, now you guys who are on the top 70, you guys are the B League guys. You guys are playing on the non-designated events. So we have to also be specific. If you're the B League guy now, you can't be thrilled to be on these other tournaments making less money, because some of them, obviously, the big ones get 25 million purses, and the smaller ones get what, 6, 7, 8 million. So, and there's more. Remember, there's more than outside of the top 70 players.
That is true, but you also have to keep in mind LIV has a very limited number of spots too, so it's not like the entire top 70 can go to LIV at this point. So I mean that's part of it. And then the other thing you have to keep in mind, and this is more specifically about the sort of mindset of these professional golfers, like they got to the point where they are is because they're very singular focused on golf, on improving their games, and they're not really like they're not as involved in this stuff as someone like Phil Mickelson, who's been talking about this stuff basically for as long as I've been a golf fan. So I mean, there's people like that that are very much into the business side. They like understand this stuff, and there's other players that like they don't care. They're just going to do what their agents and managers tell them to do. They're going to show up at the events.
And
they're going to know that they're going to make as much money as possible.
And many of them will have had great relationships. There's no way that people like Ed Hurley, who's respected in the sport of golf by many people, who's got a great relationship with some of these players, hasn't been on the phone saying, hey guys, we're not quite sure. He might, okay, I don't know. I'm saying he might be on the phone saying, we're not sure it's going to turn up, but don't worry, we're going to look after you. Like they will have got relationships and friendships with the players, with the agents, with the management. I think that where I'd be really interested to see is once a decision's made on is there going to be a merger or not, what happens then? That's the big thing I think we're going to see, and that's the most interesting thing, because at the moment, what's the phrase? They're in a holding pattern. Everyone's in a holding pattern.
Yes.
And
it's a lot of dominoes left to fall. Yeah. It's exciting.
We're not at the beginning of the end. We're at the end of the beginning.
It's Friday. Monday morning, Jay Monahan goes back in the office. How does he rebuild trust after everything that's happened, coming out on June 6th with Yasser Al-Rumayyan on CNBC, surprising the world by saying, hey, we're going to have this merger, and then having a medical condition at some point. And now he's returning after the Senate hearing, of course. And what does he do to start rebuilding trust within the PGA Tour and not completely shuttering the brand?
I've already said the easiest way he does this, and this is when we'll find out what are the sides that the different players are on. I say players, I mean Ed, Ron, and Jimmy. The PGA board he will have to decide whether with them is it going to go ahead or isn't it, and he then makes one or two decisions. If he feels the deal's being scuppered, he can then bow out and go, I wanted this deal to go through. I was part of this deal. It's now not going through. I'm now going to resign because there's no deal and this is not the way I wanted to go. Or they get the deal to go forward and he says, I'm going to see this deal through. I'm going to be here for the next 12 months to get this through, to make all my apologies to players, put things right, whatever else, and then I'll be leaving. That I feel is the easiest way for him to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that he can. I don't think that he really can, but usually in these scenarios, the only way to really get people in your corner again is to make sure they get as much money as possible. So I do think that he is going to have to follow through with this sort of what they're calling a equalization fund, which is basically for a lot of the top players that stayed with the PGA Tour. And by the way, that idea came straight from Yasser and the PIF and wasn't necessarily coming from the PGA Tour leadership. just from all the communication that was released, that was pretty clear. I think that's the only path to really do it, to make sure these guys' pockets are as lined as possible. And typically that's the thing that's going to make everybody forget about this in a year.
Folks, I believe Hunter Mahan's tweet was something along the lines of them trying to figure out the procedure to remove the CEO. I don't recall exactly. But if Jay Monahan walks in on Monday morning and all these guys are thumbing through the handbook trying to find how to get rid of Monahan, then he knows his goose is cooked. It's been another exciting episode of the Rush Hour Golf Podcast. Subscribe, share, and like.